Hello, Townies. It's Charlie here, co-founder of Town. We are having an amazing conversation in just a few moments with an incredible award-winning writer, author, and journalist, Chris Turner. It was part of Jen Padalecki's book club pick. So this is going to be a phenomenal conversation. So let me just grab Jen here about this one. So let's see if we can get everybody in here.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
person
How's your
in
internet?
another room. Hi. It's
I don't know. I mean,
okay right now.
I can
How's yours?
see and hear you, so that's good. Can you see and hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
I can, yeah, actually. Well done.
We did
Well
it.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did it. Super casual. Um, so we're just waiting for Chris right now, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about this pick before we get into it, because I want to tee up a little bit who Chris is and what this book
Yeah.
has sort of
Do you
meant
want
to
to
us
start
a
that or do
little
you
bit.
want me to start it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'll do it. Well, let me talk about it, because uh, I think when I first saw the book, the title itself kind of matched Town, right? Like, we're trying to figure out solutions. We're trying to get past debate. We're trying to, so much of this is so doom and gloom that we get lost in
Yeah.
the defeatism of it, and then want to like give up,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I think um that's what really excited me about this recommendation, which really came from you. I know that you've read it twice now. I think last year you started it and you were
Yeah,
really excited, and then we've got all of us excited, and I really love that it definitely speaks to the town ethos, and I love that instead of focusing on the problems, which is something that I normally do, and I get kind of in this loop cycle and about what's wrong. And what I love, what Chris does, is that he's focusing on the solution and the positive aspect without it being sort of Pollyanna. And I felt like it really resonated. It was really inspiring. And so I'm really excited to talk to him about that approach and how he is able to attack such a heavy, dark issue with that lightheartedness and optimism.
totally. Yeah. So just for everybody who's joining us, um, so Chris wrote a book called How to Be a Climate Optimist: Blueprints for a Better World, and he is an award-winning author and journalist, one of, I think, Canada's leading writers and speakers, and he comes from Calgary, and his journalism has taken him from the beginnings of sustainable and renewable energies, that whole revolution, and he's been to these places where they're kind of innovating and doing really interesting stuff. And I think his book, if I were to describe it, kind of seeks to make sense of the global environmental challenges we have and that we're facing, and help us move past that kind of despair we feel about. There's article after article about how everything is super dire and really kind of scary, right? And we need to move it and turning it into a passion for building a future rather than like avoiding what is
Mm-hmm.
happening. We need to build towards something, which I think everyone here will agree is an
Um,
important step that we should be taking.
Really fast, Charlie, do you know, can you add Chris via, or should I have done it?
I'm trying to find him. I don't see
Chris, are
him
you
here yet.
there?
So if Chris, if you're here, otherwise I'll just talk about your book for you. Then we'll just do that. Um, yeah, let's see. I keep seeing requests to join, but I don't see Chris yet. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing him. Well, I'm going to share a couple tidbits while we wait for Chris. Let's see if we have any questions as well. Awesome. If you have any questions about this book too, I've read it twice now, and it's a very easy, simple, fast read. I love audio books too, and this is an
Libro.
easy audiobook to
Thank
listen
you.
to while you're, yeah, me, bro. Yep, pretty great. Let's see.
Well, I also
I don't
wonder
see him.
if,
Yeah.
because from town, maybe I'm supposed to do it, but I can't because it's, sorry. watching. Hi, Anson. I'm sure you're like, ha 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 ha. I can never figure out technology.
Anson.
So,
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not seeing him here. Let's see. I'm not seeing him here yet.
Chris, are you there?
Chris, if you're here, let the spirit speak. Oh, there it is. Oh, here he is. I see him. I see him. I see him. I'm gonna follow. Why don't you? I think we can do it. If you can request to join, Chris, I see you. This may also be maybe because is your account private, Chris? Have you gone private because the big industries are attacking you, Chris? You may need to turn off your privacy for just a moment with us. I'm so sorry. We're gonna out you as this climate
Secret's
journalist
to wait,
the world.
Wait. Hey, I don't have an invitation.
Yes, so you can request to join, Chris. I think. Hold on one second here. This is Scott. We always have a little side curveball.
What's an IG Live without a little tech curveball? I hate technology.
Let me see. Yeah, technology is great. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how great technology is to save our planet. So Chris, we can't invite you. It may be because your account is on private at the moment. If you make it not private for the purposes of this, yeah, I can search him and then I can find his name in the viewers, but I can't invite him to join us. Wait. Oh, there he is.
How many people does it take to get on Instagram Live? We made it.
There we go.
We did.
Thank you for joining. Sorry.
And now I've taught everyone on this chat just my level of familiarity with Instagram Live.
Hey, we've been doing this while we still
listen. We're here. We can do tech support. We can.
If you can see and hear me now, we're good.
Yeah.
Anything we can.
All right.
We're good.
Tap twice.
Now, yeah. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining.
Anyway, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
No.
Thanks so much. Your book is such a great balance of practicality and optimism, because I think a lot of people look at the word optimism and like go, oh, okay, everything's going to be fine with the climate. And kind of, especially like the cynical downstairs neighbor that you have in Canada, we have some issues with some cynicism. But yes. your book was awesome.
Yeah, and I try to make a point of making it clear when I talk about optimism, it's not some sort of, wish fulfillment. Like maybe someone will figure out how to fix this. It's looking at, 20 years of, very, very slow, difficult process of figuring out what is it that we need to do? What are the tools we need to use to do it? How do we get to, a much more stable sort of energy and climate footing? And are we actually heading there now? And I think that's the big thing where the optimism comes from, is not sort of, hey, wouldn't it be great if? It's actually, we're heading there now. It doesn't look like it yet. The first phase is the long, slow buildup until things really kind of hit sort of mainstream launch velocity or whatever. But that's where we're at now. There's this inflection point now where, just today I was seeing, like to use solar power as an example, the first terawatt of solar took 20 some years to build out. The next terawatt's going to take less than 5. The one after that, less than 3. Like it's this steadily accelerating sort of. We don't feel it yet, and particularly one of the big problems, obviously, with I'm sitting here in southern Alberta where we've had to hide from wildfire smoke for a lot of the last month. It sure doesn't feel like things are getting better. But despairing over the current state of things is not going to get us where we need to go.
Yeah, focusing on the fact that all of Canada right now is on fire is not the way to go. No, I really, we obviously delve a lot into climate and sustainable solutions in that space with town. And what I really loved about your book is the optimistic point. I feel like we were saying earlier, I'm so guilty of it, but I get stuck in that loop of the doom and the gloom and being angry and being blaming and finger pointing. And I love, and I'm even bringing it into my own parenting now sometimes, about that optimistic, like, let's focus on the solutions. Like, what are those things? Let's not focus on what's wrong. Let's focus on making it right. I would love just to talk about that. I know you said that a lot of things are going right, but this is a more unusual book, because most of the books that you read are about, you know, the planet burning up and on fire, and yours has such a really light, not light touch because it's a heavy subject, but just a optimistic and actionable touch to it. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and about your approach and why.
Why optimism? Is it possible?
You know, I would say I came by it honestly, because my background's in journalism. There's a natural sort of cynicism and skepticism. If you're any good at journalism, like, you kind of think, what this person's telling me is not the whole story. What is the whole story? You distrust official sources. You distrust, you know, sort of tidy narratives that say things are going to get better, or all is fine, or whatever. But really, I mean, you know, 20 years ago now, you know, my wife and I were expecting our first child, and I'd been writing some stuff on how bad things were going to get. And from a really practical point of view, because we knew we were going to go, you know, I was, you know, thinking about a book project that looked at the sort of scope of the climate crisis, which we weren't even calling a crisis yet. And initially I thought, oh, let's go to the places that are going to get worse first, you know, Pacific Islands that are going to vanish into the sea as it rises, that kind of thing. And I just, from a practical point of view, thought, you know, if my wife and newborn child are going to be traveling with me, do I want those to be the first memories we have together? Or would I rather, not even really knowing what I was looking for, would I rather see things that might work in the future? And so that sort of began, you know, this sort of trip down this sort of what eventually became an optimistic trail. And I think the big thing with this book is, looking back 20 years on, could I plausibly say to my kids or anyone else, one, it's getting better, and two, we have actually, the stuff that I started talking about 20 years ago is in fact the toolkit that's gonna really be able to address this. And I you know, looked at that in the book as honestly as possible. And the lightness, as you describe it, comes from being able to say, actually, yeah. And in particular, in the last 5 years or so, all this stuff that was sort of around the edges of the mainstream, maybe one day we'd use a lot more renewable energy and electric cars would become a thing, and people would actually care enough about the climate crisis to get some decent leadership on some fronts, and, you know, part of the corporate world at least would care. Maybe that'll happen. And now it really is. And again, I think it's really hard to maintain that sense that we are actually doing a good job, because the problem is so big and so hard to wrap your head around, and is, in fact, you know, it's very much in your face. You know, any given day, any part of the world, someone is dealing with, you know, unprecedented weather, unprecedented disaster. It's really hard to kind of turn from that and say, hey, but, you know, solar panels are great. But in fact, that is how we're going to get there, you know?
I mean, and that's present throughout the book, right? And I think one of the things that you also talk about in the book, which I think bears sort of inspection, is that there are a lot of people right now rightfully angry. You know, Greta Thunberg is an amazing spokesperson for calling people to task and accountability, but is the urgent and dangerous like that messaging around the dire need working for the world? Is it working that we're scaring people into caring?
I mean, I think there's an audience for which that's very effective, and it's a really necessary audience. It's the people, you know, who are going to live it every day. You know, my older son, who was the one we were expecting when I first started on this, was, you know, one of the leaders of his school's Fridays for Future protests, and they would walk out on Friday and go down to City Hall here in Calgary, and, you know, there'd be sometimes a dozen and sometimes 2 or 3 of them, but they did it. And I think for, you know, him and his friends, that sense of injustice was really what drew them to taking action. It's whether that can keep you there, I think, is, you know, how long can you stay angry and not drive yourself crazy? At some point, you got to get back to living your life, and hopefully doing it in as mindful a way as possible, and hopefully in a world that is increasingly awake to the fact that we need to change direction on some key things. And so I think there's no question you need Greta Thunberg. You need voices like that continuing to push leaders in the political realm and the business realm to stay awake to this, to push harder, to move faster. But where I guess I maybe differ a little bit is that you do set the sort of down note of that tends to be, you know, we've done nothing and there's only so many years left. And I don't agree that we've done nothing. it actually, I mean, I keep coming back to solar power, but it's a good one because it's having such a great, sort of explosive moment right now. But, it took a long, long time and a lot of work and a lot of money to make solar panels cheap and easy enough to install that we're now doing them at the scale. Like that wasn't going to just happen because we got really mad at politicians 20 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. There's a process, and where the optimism of the book comes from is I'm basically arguing, and that process has hit its like prime time moment. This is, you're going to walk out your door and see more electric cars on the street and more, renewable energy in use and people using heat pumps for heating and cooling and better efficiency. And, you go to the store and there'll be a lot more green options on the shelves. And all of that is, this sort of slow building, because we're talking about such a massive change. And that's one of the things I try to convey in the book as well, is switching from how the whole world makes and uses energy every day from one basis to another is about as big a thing as any of us are ever going to be part of in our lives. It's not going to happen, a week from now, we're not going to go, oh yeah, we're done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and talking about this big thing, I mean, it's such a big, heavy topic. What was the process like for you in writing this book? I mean, how long did it take, and how did you know where to start? And I also found the structure really interesting too. Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the background in research is, 15, 20 years now on the beat. But this particular book, we were very, my publisher, Random House in Canada, who I'd done 2 other sort of climate solution books with, but the previous one had been almost 10 years now. It's a book called The Leap that came out in 2011. And we were talking about, I knew I wanted to write something about this sort of accelerating pace of change and things getting better. And interestingly enough, that almost at a kind of, personal level among the people in the room, there was this, sense among the editorial staff at Random House, like, yeah, people are finding it very, very, 3 years ago now, actually just before the pandemic. So 2019, 4 years ago now. The mood in the room was sort of like, yeah, people really feel like, I remember somebody saying, I'm not even sure if I should be, starting a family in a world pointed in this direction. And so the intention to some degree was to say, yes, there is there is reason to be optimistic enough about where we're heading, that if you want to have kids, go have kids and, share the joy of creation with your family in the world. Please don't give up on us. We actually are starting to sort some stuff out. And so one of the things that I had in mind as I was writing it was to really, as much as possible, not get lost in the weeds of technical details or, heavy kind of politicking kind of stuff. There is some politics in there. It has to be. But I didn't want to get down deep on which policies work best and all that stuff that makes a lot of people just kind of stop paying attention and wonder, get to the point. Is it getting better or is it not?
Yeah.
And so I tried to do that, in while allowing the story to be told in a little bit of I guess an organic way, beginning from, anyone who's engaged in this kind of work, more or less full time, probably began from a point of real fear or despair or, sense of looming disaster. So how do you get from that point to feeling like, there's still a lot of hard work to be done. There's still going to be a lot of really difficult challenges along the way. And the climate we're going to do it in is going to be different from the one that, some of us grew up in, depending on your age. But the work's there now. The people, and the technology and the energy and the innovation and the money are actually increasingly there to seriously move in the right direction now.
And for those of you just joining, the book is called How to Be a Climate Optimist.
Blueprints for a Better World.
Yeah, it's right there. Yep. There it is. Thank you. I just want to make sure we got the book in there too, because people are asking if it's available and they want to.
And I will make sure. I know Random House Canada didn't a while ago have a good link to an American ebook and audiobook purchase, but I believe they do, and I'll make sure I'll share that with you when we're off the chat here. Yeah.
Perfect. We're both fathers, Chris. We both have been in the lucky position of having to come down on our kids for something, maybe some penalties, some discipline. You write interestingly that that punishment and sanctions may not be the best route. So if my kids aren't eating their vegetables, how do I can penalize them for that, or I can incentivize them. What's your take on, I'd love for you to elaborate on the relationship between the punishment sanction
Yeah, the carrot in the stick is
helping
another
with
way to
climate
think about it.
change.
Yeah, and I think it's something you don't need any penalties.
Yep.
I mean, I think we're doing things like in some way making it cost to emit greenhouse gases without care is worth doing in
Yep.
one way or another. Whether it's a carbon price like we have in Canada, whether it's various state level things like you have and carbon trading that some of the U.S. states do. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. You do want some of that. But when you look at the time for how long we need to stay sort of on this path and how big the move is, I think people need to want to be excited. I think it's really important that we get excited about where we're going and not just what we're trying to escape. And so that's where, I think the optimistic side of things, like one way to think about it is a lot of people are going to, in the next 5-10 years, make their first, electric vehicle purchase of some sort, whether it's a car or an e-bike or a scooter or who knows. And it may not be because they're thinking, I really need to shrink my carbon footprint. It may just be, this seems like the best vehicle for my needs. This is the coolest car this is what I want, not just, this is what I must do as a duty to make things better.
Well, speaking of cars, I'm really passionate about motivating people to get out, move their bodies in whatever capacity that they can. And you have a whole section in your book where you link the way that cities focus on cars versus walkability, just in urban planning and how it relates to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that really gets at I think, when I talk about in the book is doing less bad versus doing much better. And less bad is how we've often thought about environmental problems. Like, how do you, I need my car to be a little bit better on emissions or whatever. Well, what about building neighborhoods where every single thing you need to do every day does not have to involve driving somewhere and parking and all of that. And the much better side of that is those tend to be the neighborhoods and the communities and the cities that we think are really inviting to spend time in anyway. Because there's places to go and see and be seen. We all felt this, I think, in the early months of the pandemic, where you saw, all this stuff that I had first encountered as like, climate friendly urban planning stuff, putting more, taking parking spots off the streets and putting, patio tables out and that kind of thing, and building outdoor public space that people could spend time in, which we were doing sort of in crisis in the pandemic. Those are all also, I mean, I think, most of us who experienced that in our community thought, well, this is actually just nicer. I like being able to walk down the street and have somewhere to sit and have a coffee or whatever, and not be, choking on the exhaustive, dense traffic flying by as I'm doing so, or whatever the situation is. That's not going to be everywhere. We've already built so much, particularly in North America, so much of our cities have been built out to this sort of suburban scale that it's going to be, some of those communities are probably going to continue to rely on cars for a lot of their daily needs for a very long time. But anywhere we can make it better, why wouldn't we? In addition to the climate positive stuff, why wouldn't we offer people better neighborhoods? Well, it's not expensive, it's not difficult. It's just kind of a bit of a mental rethink, and a lot of that we did by accident. No one stood up one day at City Hall in 1950 and said, let's plan all the cities for cars. Let's, make the most space on the street for cars. Yeah. Let's, sacrifice entire neighborhoods to get, lots of cars through on their commute. That just kind of happened because it was the way we thought we wanted to build our cities at the time. We can change that. I mean, it can seem, and I talk about this in the book, when you get engaged in politics at the local level, it can seem like a very difficult thing to get, one local representative to listen to one good idea and champion it. But when these things get moving, you can improve things right in your community really quickly. And those are the things, beyond what you can do in your daily life as an individual, that are really powerful if you can, change the way your community sort of thinks about its public space and build more room for people.
That whole section in the book is so great because we in the States definitely romanticize these European communities where they're only using bikes and they're walking around and they're going to their local market. It's such a romantic dream for so many people that you have this walkable, beautiful neighborhood, and yet it's positive for the world and the planet and the health of the planet. So, and you even mentioned in the book, we go to Disney World and go into these sprawls that look like a walkable neighborhood, or we go imagine we're in New York walking a green space or whatever. It's in our heart. We just at a civic level need to take care of our immediate neighborhoods even, and maybe we can't even think outside of that, but if we all do that with our neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, particularly if there's a way, and this can be very hard given where our political conversation is in a lot of the world right now, but to try and find places where we agree rather than disagree, because obviously we saw this with the sort of urban better urban design that got sucked into this insane conspiracy around 15-minute neighborhoods, and surveillance was going to trap you in those neighborhoods as soon as they got them built, and so there's always going to be a lot of pushback in that direction. But if you can get back to it, as you say, like literally, the core of Disney World is a walkable main street. Like that's the sort of central building block of this place that people plan their whole, summer's whole, in some places whole childhood. The great highlight is to go to a walkable neighborhood and see other people and go on rides.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we like to talk about, maybe if you don't mind sharing your perspective, is town stands for take only what we need. So we'd love to hear from you. Like, what are some things that you do to help sustain yourself?
As we were just talking about, my wife and I, chose to live in a, dense, walkable old community very close to downtown. We have very good transit nearby. We're very close to good bike lanes. Not everyone has that opportunity, and I recognize that. But that was one of the big things for us, was we wanted to live somewhere where we were raising our kids, and we're, in our own lives as well, to not think of, needing a car to go everywhere, not think of, shops and businesses and going to the, now that my son's 18, going to the coffee shop or the pub, because the drink age is 18 in this part of Canada, is not something that you need to take a trip to do. You can do it just up the block, and you can know your neighbors and all that kind of good stuff. So that was sort of the big thing. The other thing, I try to, without getting pulled too far into it, to engage when I can in the local political process at whatever level I think is useful. You don't always win those fights. Sometimes you lose them quite badly, but it's worth trying to lend your voice to those. I think one of my big things is I'm less focused on what I personally can do. So I'm less obsessed with getting solar panels on my own roof as seeing what we can do to make the community work better, and engaging in that side of the community. We're just so much more powerful, when we come together and unite around this than any of us can do all by ourselves. That said, we continue to do our best on all of that as well, and try and keep the personal carbon footprint small and all that, but I don't, the thing I don't like all that much, and I've never engaged in myself, is trying to shame people into change. I don't think it's a particularly great way to go. Particularly when we're dealing with, like, these are pretty fundamental things, like, how you take your kids to school in the morning, or where you work and what kind of work you do. Like, we don't want you to, I don't think it helps the scale of shift that we're in the midst of, for people to just feel bad about what they're doing all the time, or that, I don't know, that seems like a limited motivational technique.
Well, so more pubs is what I'm hearing, and more accessible neighborhoods for wheelchairs and walking and all. Yes, great. Works for me. Well, Chris, thanks so much. Definitely go get that book. Vanna, do you have the book again?
Oh, me?
Put that up again, Vanna White. Yeah. Here we go.
There you go.
Both dual books. There it is. There it is. Chris Turner's How to Be a Climate Optimist, Blueprints for a Better World. Go get it. It's great. And well done on the narration as well. It was an easy read. I was running, listening to the book.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks all. Take care. Go follow Chris, or go look for Chris on the web. Let's say.
No,
he's keeping himself private.
My Instagram is private. I'm all over Twitter, so I'll open up the Instagram as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Yep.
Thanks.
Follow the town. Follow Chris.
Bye.
Go. All right. Bye, everybody.